Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Good morning. And to match the mood of this bright morning, we have a very cheerful subject. In quest of bliss, in search of bliss. That's the subject. We are going to go out in search of bliss. And when we think about it, that's what life is. You see, the fundamental quest of our lives is the search for happiness, search after happiness, a search of how to overcome suffering. So overcoming suffering and attainment of happiness, these seem to be the essence of all the strivings of life. Not just our lives, anybody's lives. Any living creature, in fact, is searching for satisfaction, happiness, pleasure, is trying to overcome suffering, dissatisfaction, misery. When we come to Vedanta, they say that the goal of Vedanta, what is Vedanta for? What is spirituality for? In a very short but powerful phrase, Atyantika dukkha nivritti paramananda praptischa. Complete cessation, completely overcoming suffering and attainment of bliss. This is the goal of Vedanta. So we see that the goal of our lives and the goal of Vedanta, they more or less coincide. What we are trying to do in life and what Vedanta tries to do is exactly the same. The goal is the same. But the ways, the difference is in the way. There is a wise way of seeking happiness and there is an, what shall I say, otherwise way of seeking happiness. So, let us look deeply into what we are trying to do in life and what Vedanta tells us. What is a better way of seeking happiness? The text that I have taken up for as a basis of today's talk is from one of the Upanishads, the Taittiriya Upanishad. In the Taittiriya Upanishad, in the second chapter of the Taittiriya Upanishad, the chapter is called Brahmananda Valli, the chapter dealing with the bliss of Brahman. In the second chapter, we come across a section called Ananda Mimamsa, the analysis of happiness, an inquiry, an investigation into happiness, an investigation into bliss. So I shall take it up there. What they will do is, you see, the Vedas have two parts, broadly speaking. The part dealing with conventional religion, karma kanda, ritualistic portion, and the part dealing with philosophy, with the Upanishads, the highest teachings of Vedas, which are called Vedanta. In fact, the very name Vedanta comes from the latter part of the Vedas. And in these two parts, the first part and the second part, in these two parts, the conception of happiness and how to attain happiness, very different approaches are there. So we are going to look at these two approaches. In fact, the section of the Upanishad which I'll take up now talks about these two approaches. And we'll see how it relates so directly to our lives. These two parts of the Vedas, I was just thinking, today we have a new term. Most of us, we have heard about it. Spiritual but not religious. And they even have an acronym for it, SBNR. Spiritual but not religious. And many people say that we are spiritual. It's not that we are atheistic or we don't believe in God or we are materialists. No, we are spiritual, but we are not religions. We are not religious. We don't believe in any particular religion, nor do we think we should. Well, let me go on. Yeah, it's back. So we are spiritual but not religious. Now when I was thinking about the two parts of the Vedas, the first part is what we might today call religious but not particularly spiritual. What we might call conventional religion. That's the first part of the Vedas, the Karma Kanda. The second part would be, well, something like spiritual but not religious, although they would be scandalized if we put it that way. They would say religious but in a wiser sense, in a spiritual sense. So they don't reject religion, but they base their spirituality on religion, on a deeper and more advanced understanding of religion. It's sort of religion for grown-ups. Now, let's go straight to the text and see what they talk about. The Taittiriya Upanishad, second chapter, section 8, Ananda Mimamsa, an analysis, an inquiry, investigation into happiness. First they tell us, let's talk about happiness. Imagine, dream about happiness. What's the greatest amount of happiness you can conceive of in life? When you're going to speak about happiness, when you're going to analyze something, you need a unit of measurement. So you want to analyze something, even something as abstract as happiness, you need to measure it. So they're going to develop a unit of measurement. In order to do that, they say, dream about happiness. Just think, what are the conditions in which you'll be happiest? It doesn't cost to dream, it's no expense at all. And so they set up an ideal of human happiness. Let's see what they say. I'll read out the original Sanskrit just to get the flavor of this sound. Imagine this was first composed, revealed, chanted 40 centuries ago, 4,000 to 4,500 years ago. It goes like this. So what are the conditions of happiness, human happiness, maximum human happiness? It starts like this. Saisha anandasya mimagam sa bhavati. Hence, we start an analysis, an investigation into Ananda. Ananda is a Sanskrit word for bliss. How do we go about it? He starts, Yuva syat sadhu yuva adhyayakaha. First condition to be happy in human life. Wait for it. You have to be young. I'm sorry. At this point, the more elderly start booing. And first time I said that, they went boo. Well, they are blunt about it. Things are better when we are young. You're more vigorous and bodies heal faster and you have a very sunny outlook on life and you're looking ahead. So, yuva syat has to be a young person. But not just a young person. Sadhu yuva. A good person. Person of good character, good intentions, noble person. Sadhu yuva. And not just a good young person, but also adhyayakaha. A highly learned, very well educated, Harvard or Yale or whatever, and multiple PhDs or whatnot, whatever you can think of. A really very well educated person. And what else? Ashishto dridishto balishtaha. Has to be strongly built, physically strong, good health, and energetic, and also a lot of pluck and vim and vigor and go and enthusiasm in life. So ashishta, dridishta, balishta. So this kind of a young person, highly educated, motivated, strong, energetic, with good intentions, and tasyeyam prithivi sarva vittasya purna syat. And he should have this entire world, the wealth of this entire world laid out before him or her. Should be very, very rich, not just ordinarily rich, not just Beverly Hills rich, alarmingly rich. Why? Well, because might be young, might be educated, might be enthusiastic and everything, but spends his whole life in trying to gain wealth, and then by the time he's got whatever he wants, his life is gone. So, as somebody said, what the tragedy of our lives is we spend we waste our health. We lose our health in trying to earn wealth. And then we lose our wealth in trying to regain our health. So, that should not happen. So this person, this very, very lucky person is born with a silver spoon in his mouth, and says, Sa eko manusha anandaha. This is the unit, a very worldly conception of human happiness. Whatever one can conceive of, this is the unit of human happiness. He says, consider this to be one unit of human happiness. So this is the highest what a worldly person can conceive of, think of. This is the highest one can go. And this person, just imagine the happiness of this person. Maybe you have one or two such persons in an entire generation. I used to give examples, say somebody like Bill Gates or something, and until somebody told me, young person said, that's so 90s. You have to think of somebody of this generation. I don't know whom you'll think of, Elon Musk or something like that. This is one unit of human happiness. Is there anything more? And the early portion of the Vedas, the conventional religion, tells us, yes, it is possible to get even more happiness than this. But not here. The world can provide you at the most with this kind of happiness, but not more than this. But there is another kind of happiness. There are worlds beyond this world. Have faith that there is something called heaven, and the Hindus have a system of multiple heavens. Buddhists too. And these heavens are not particularly spiritual. They are mostly places where, it's like a perpetual party. You're having fun all the time. So there are these different kinds of heavens they talk about in the Vedas or other Hindu scriptures, Buddhist scriptures, Jain scriptures also. It's kind of a heavenly Beverly Hills or Bel Air or something like that. So when you move from this life to that life, it's like moving from downtown to there or something like that maybe. How is it different? Well, they say for happiness, one needs three things. To enjoy life, one needs three things. One is a body, this body. In Sanskrit, sharira. The other thing you need is an object of enjoyment, vishaya. It might be music, it might be food and dance and things to do and vacations to take. Those are vishaya. The things in the world out there which give us happiness. Not only that, you need an environment. Environment is called loka, or a world. So loka, vishaya, sharira. Body, things to enjoy, a body to enjoy it with and things to enjoy, and a world in which you can enjoy it. A world is important because the same cup of tea you can take on a stand on the roadside, and the same cup of tea if you take it in a very fancy hotel, they'll charge you much more. It's the same thing you're enjoying. You're the same person and the cup of tea is the same, but what's different? The different is the loka, the environment. So they're charging you for the environment. Now, the belief is that after death, one can go to higher lokas, worlds, better environments, and you get better vishaya, better, finer forms of enjoyment, which you cannot have in this human world. And to enjoy all that, you need a finer body, so that you get certain heavenly bodies. And this was the conception they had in the ancient religions. So these are the conceptions of different heavens, and they have multiple layers of heavens. Like hotels, 3-star, 5-star, 7-star, so higher and higher heavens. Remember, none of them very spiritual. But definitely fun places to go to. And this was the kind of idea people had of life here. I'll try to be happy here. I need youth and health and wealth and energy and education and good things to do. And beyond this life, I believe in religion which tells me about heavens to go to where I'll be happier than I ever was here. So this is the conception of happiness. Let's call this worldly. I didn't want to call it worldly happiness because it also includes other worldly happiness after death, a kind of post-mortem plan for happiness. And how do you go to those worlds? In the Vedas, the idea was one would perform various kinds of Vedic rituals and do a lot of good karma, be nice to other people, donate to your church, and do all sorts of things, good things, which religion tells you is good. And as a result of that, one earns merit, punya in Sanskrit. And as a result of this punya, you get to go to these fancy places after death. Now, how do I know that I'll go to such a place, if such a place even exists, and that I'll go there? What's the guarantee? Well, the guarantee is faith. You believe in it. And suppose I don't go, I can't come back and catch you, Swami, priest, father, whoever. Well, that's just, you believe in it. And the people used to believe in it. Very, very seriously. Even now many people believe in it. When we become monks, when we renounce worldly life, we also have to renounce otherworldly life. So when we take the vows of monasticism, we seek spiritual enlightenment. One of the things we renounce is happiness in this world, search for worldly happiness, and also the search for otherworldly happiness, which means all these so-called heavens. I remember once a very senior Swami was teaching us the Upanishads, which are the second part of the Vedas, and talking about the renouncing of the world and the renouncing of the heavenly pleasures. And many of us, we said immediately, oh, we renounce heaven, we don't want heaven. And then he said, that's because you don't believe in it. It's very easy to renounce heaven when you don't believe in it. You who cannot overcome the temptation of a chocolate bar, and you were talking about renouncing heavenly pleasures. That's just because modern man, we have sort of lost faith in such things. Many people have, but many people do still believe. But these are all worldly or otherworldly pleasures. The Vedas, at this point, they take a turn. The second part of the Vedas starts, what we call the Vedanta. And it starts with a story. He says, you who are seeking happiness in this way, by getting pleasures in this world and seeking something similar in the next world, consider this story. There was this dog who had a bone, which it would chew. And it would chew the bone would cut its inner lip and draw blood there, and the dog would taste its own blood and say, that's a tasty bone. And the dog would be very happy with that bone, and it would bury the bone carefully, as dogs do, and once in a while when it wanted pleasure, it would go and chew the bones so that it would get the taste of what it thought. The dog thought it was the taste of the bone. It was not the taste of the bone. It was the taste of its own blood. Gruesome the story may be, but the Vedas tell us, Upanishads tell us, we are doing the same thing. Whatever pleasure, happiness you find in the world outside, through food and music and art and dance and through great pursuits in life, whatever pleasure you may believe you will find in the heavens to come, all of them are not out there, not in the world, not even in the heavens. It's your own pleasure which you are tasting. It's your own self which you are tasting. According to Vedanta, we are not this body, Sharira. We are not even the subtle body inside this ideas, thoughts, the mind, intellect, emotions. Not even that. Beyond this physical body, beyond the mind also, transcending both, what we are is an unchanging existence, consciousness, bliss. Sanskrit, Sat, Chit, Ananda. Pure existence, pure consciousness, pure bliss. Today we are concerned with the pure bliss aspect of it, not the existence and consciousness aspect of it. That's what we are. And what is happening is, though we are bliss itself, what is happening is, when we have desires, when we want something, I am limited, I'll be happy if I see that movie, or I go for that vacation, or I have a relationship with this person. These are the ideas, the desires which come up in the mind, and Vedanta tells us it obscures our own inherent bliss. It obscures it. We are not aware of it anymore. We do not experience it. What we experience is the dissatisfied mind. And when we struggle to get it, whatever we want, it could be that piece of cake, or it could be something very high in art or music or in business or something. When our desire, when our ambition, when our goal is satisfied, mind calms down for a while. For just a short while, the tension goes out of the mind. And our inherent bliss, Sat Chit Ananda, that shines forth in the calm mind. The inherent bliss blazes forth for just a fraction of a second, or just for a little while. And that's what we experience as happiness. And the mistake we make, very much like that little dog, is that, oh, that piece of cake makes me happy. Whenever I want to be happy, I'll eat a piece of cake. Or that person makes me happy. Or this place makes me happy. Or this activity or this job makes me happy. That's not so. It's our inner happiness. And the proof is in our daily experience. If the piece of cake makes you happy, 2 pieces should make you more happy. Will you say, oh Swami, it does. Well, okay, 3 pieces should make you even more happy. Then you will say, well, not so much, but it does increase my happiness. The first lesson of economics, whenever you go to learn economics, in the first class itself, they'll teach you the law of diminishing marginal utility. You get happiness from consumption of something you like, more happiness if you consume more, and more happiness if you consume even more, but each time you consume a little more, you get smaller and smaller increments of happiness. The utility, the marginal utility, the addition to your total happiness which you get becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. It diminishes. The law of diminishing marginal utility. And thousands of years ago, Vedanta tells us, that's what happens to us. Just look at your own experience. If those things give us happiness, then each time you have that, you should get equal happiness. More you have, more happiness you should get. No. When somebody gives you the 5th piece of cake or forces the 10th piece of cake on you, you want to run away, you want to throw up. How is it that the same thing can give you happiness and the same thing cannot give you happiness? Because that thing is not giving you happiness. The happiness is shining forth from within us. Well, you'll say, all right, let the happiness shine forth from within us, but at least I need the cake to make it shine forth from within me. So ultimately, I do need the cake. I do need the things outside. But at this point, a smart person will think, wait a minute. If happiness is within me, if what I'm seeking throughout my life is within me all the time, and it is obscured only by my restless mind, by my turbulent mind, by the desires in my mind, wouldn't it be a smarter way to be happy if I just calm down my mind and let go of those desires? Instead of struggling in the world outside to satisfy those desires, and if I do get satisfied finally, all the result I get is mind calms down. Somebody said, our entire consumer economy is driven by the psychological forces of tension and release of tension. You build up a tension, a desire by advertisement or whatever, and you get it, a release of tension. And that release of tension is happiness. That's how we are accustomed to getting happiness from the world outside. But imagine if I could let go, if it's possible to let go of those desires, to settle the mind down in a serene mind, in a calm mind, would I not be happy? If this Vedantic theory is right, can I put it to the test? And Vedanta says you should. That's a smart way of doing it. If you are convinced about Vedanta, that you are not the body and mind, not subject to the limitations of flesh or the flickering mind, but an unchanging, immortal consciousness, a spirit beyond body and mind. In that case, calming the mind down, letting go of desires would be a much wiser way of enjoying the happiness which is your own property. It belongs to you. It is you yourself. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating. I'll share something. One of the ways in which I was encouraged to I was inspired to become a monk is, I saw this monastery near our house, and I saw these people wearing this funny orange dress. They didn't have a car like my dad, didn't have a job like my dad, didn't have a family like my mom and dad, and they didn't even have a host of relatives. They couldn't go out to the hotel to eat whenever they liked, or they couldn't order takeout whenever they liked. They didn't go on vacations. They mostly meditated and helped other people. And what struck me was, they were the happiest people I'd ever seen. How it struck me, I was a school kid at that time. How is it possible that all the things that my parents were trying to get in life, and succeeding to in some extent and not succeeding to in other cases, but that was life for them. All these things, these people were not pursuing, and they were happy. They were absolutely happy. That is the proof of the core idea that happiness is not got by external possessions, external activities, rather what happens inside. The happiness is your own nature, which shines out if you can settle the mind down. And here we find, it says here, the otherworldly happiness, the highest happiness in this world, and after death one can go to other worlds and get happiness 100 times the happiness of this rich person, in this rich young person. You can get in the higher heavens. But those who are convinced about Vedanta, those who are on the spiritual path, those who are spiritual, I'm not adding the not religious, but spiritual, they can get the same happiness. Which happiness? Not just the happiness of the rich young person in this world, but the 100 times more happiness of that person in the next world. You can get it in this world itself if, let me quote, Te ye shatam manusha anandaha sa eko manushya gandharvanam anandaha shrotriyasya chakama hatasya. Shrotriya, the one who is convinced about Vedanta, who's convinced that we are not the body and mind, that there is a spiritual reality within us, which transcends the limited person which we seem to be. And the goal is to find this out, to realize this, to know our true identity. If this becomes the pursuit in life, of course I'm speaking about this from the point of view of the path of knowledge. It could be from the path of devotion also. If somebody becomes convinced that God exists. God exists. You see, somebody asked, what is the essence of the message of Sri Ramakrishna? The essence is, first, God exists, God is real. Second, God can be realized, God can be experienced. Third, experiencing God is the purpose of life. If you ask, what is the purpose of life? He says, experiencing God is the purpose of life. We may say, no, it might be your purpose of life, but it certainly isn't mine. My purpose of life is, I have to build up this company, I have to get this degree from somewhere, and I have a family to look after. This is my purpose of life, if you say. The Upanishad says, with all of this, what are you trying to achieve? Well, I'm trying to be happy. This happiness which you are seeking, just another name for that is God. This ultimate, permanent, unchanging happiness, transcending the sorrows of this world. So God realization is the aim of life. He's not recommending that it should be the aim of life. He's not pushing it to you. He's just telling you what you are doing. With unknowingly you do it, it's life. Do it knowingly, it's spirituality. So God realization is the purpose of life. Whose life? Your life, everybody else's life. You are here, you know it. Those who are not here, they don't know it, but they are pursuing the same thing. They are pursuing it in indirect ways, through worldly happiness. So the goal of life, if I am convinced, is God realization, is spiritual illumination, moksha, nirvana, salvation, whatever you call it. That is the goal of my life. And one more thing, very important. Jakama hatasya. One must step away from the mad pursuit of happiness in the world outside. Stop chewing that bone. You see, trying to get happiness outside is based on a delusion that those things will give me happiness. If I know for certain the happiness is within me and radiating outwards, then why should I pursue that? Why should I pursue that? For what reason? So a spiritual seeker must step away from that pursuit. Doesn't have to become a monk or a nun. Can perfectly well be in the world. Somebody has to take care of a family. Somebody has to do a job. Not everybody has to become a monk or a nun. Of course not. But internally, one must become something like a monk or a nun, searching for spiritual realization. And once you do that, the Upanishad says, the happiness of this person multiplied 100 times, this worldly happiness multiplied by 100 times, which is promised to this person in the higher heavens after life, that happiness you will get right away. So this person who takes up a Vedantic way of life, who takes up a Vedantic goal, a spiritual seeker, when my aim is spiritual realization, I would like to know who am I? I would like to find God, experience God in my life. What they are saying is, make that your sole purpose in life. It shouldn't be a part of a to-do list. You know, number one, I have to go to Walgreens to pick up these things, and number two, I have to drop off the kids at the school, and number three, I have to realize God. Not in that way. I have to realize God. That's my one and only purpose of life. And the rest of it, whether you are going shopping or dropping up the kids in the school, all of that has to be integrated into the spiritual life. Believe me, it can all be converted into spiritual practice. Child rearing a spiritual practice. It can be done. Shopping a spiritual practice. Yeah, even that. So, now once you come to this path, what do you do actually? Well, it's very interesting. What you do is what goes under the name of spiritual practice. Spiritual practice. It's almost exactly the opposite of what a person is doing in the world outside. We generally think, if I work for myself, my career, my family, I'll be happy. And this person in the spiritual path, Vedanta teaches us, reverse it. Work not for yourself, but work perfectly altruistically. Work for the happiness of others. What others need, it could be in the small circle of your family, it could be in your community, it could be for the whole world. Hammarskjöld, the Secretary General of the United Nations, many decades ago, he writes in his diary, Secretary General of the United Nations, he writes in his diary, to truly love and make one person happy is more spiritual. He uses the word spiritual. Is more spiritual than to, try to guide the destiny of nations as a job. I'm being paid to do it, so I'm going to take care of the whole world. Okay, good. But truly, completely loving even one person and trying to make that person happy, or a small group of people, whatever, that's spiritual. So karma yoga, where you reverse the whole purpose of action. One may still be doing the same action. You could be teaching in school and taking care of your family, or working in the ashram here or whatever, but all the work is now for, they say, Ishvara Anugrahartham, for pleasing the Lord. If you believe in God, for the pleasure of God. There's a phrase they use in Christian churches. We are doing the Lord's work. Which means it's not mine. It's not mine. I am doing it as a ritual, as an offering to God. That's one aspect of spiritual practice, and a big aspect. We often think that spiritual practice means sitting and with eyes closed and meditating. Who's going to water the plants in the garden? Oh, that's not spiritual. I'm being spiritual now. I heard this story about Swami Chandikananji. He was a very senior monk of our order. It seems that when he became a monk, a novice, in India, in a place called Shargachi in Baharampur in West Bengal, in Bengal in those days, Swami Akhandanandaji, disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, was the head of that monastery at that time. And this young novice, He got up late in the morning, missed the morning meditation, then he thought, maybe after breakfast I should go and meditate. And then he went leisurely and sat down at 10 o'clock in the morning, around this time maybe, and sat down, was meditating. Whereas Akhandanandaji from outside, Swami Akhandananda, he said, go and tell that brahmachari, the novice, that instead of polluting the temple, he can come out and water the gardens in the plant. He's polluting the temple. Work can be spiritualized. What am I doing it for? What am I doing it for? I remember I was passing through an airport, a transit passenger in India once, a few years ago, late night. And I was the only transit passenger there. So the security people who frisk you, it's like the TSA here in USA. So the security people were there. And as I passed it, I was obviously a Swami. So the officer there, he frisked me and then he said, Swami, give us a talk. I said, what? Here? Now? It was nearly midnight in an Indian airport. He said, yeah, why not? I said, all right. And in India, if you go there, they have this little box they make you stand on when they frisk you. So I stood on the box and he called the security personnel. They were free. There were no other passengers. So about 8 or 9, maybe 10 people, men and women, they are policemen, they stood around. And I said to them, I was thinking, what can I say? I said to the officer, he was a Hindi-speaking gentleman from Uttar Pradesh. So I said, do you worship the Lord when you set out for work in the morning? I mean, when you leave your home? And he said in Hindi, हाँ, हनुमान जी को पूजा चढ़ाते हैं. I worship Hanuman, the Lord Hanuman, and before I leave home and come to my work. I said, what do you do? I put flowers at the feet of the Lord. And I said, well, every time a person comes up before you and you frisk that person and check that person, mentally imagine you're putting one more flower at the feet of the Lord. Do your duty to the best of your ability, firmly but politely and gently and kindly, and put that beautiful flower mentally, offer it at the feet of the Lord. And thus you do the whole day, throughout the day. And the gentleman was so happy. He said, Are wah, din bhar Hanuman ji ka puja. In Hindi it means, how wonderful. Whole day I'll be worshipping the Lord. Yes, you can do that. That's spiritualizing work. Spiritualizing love. You see, the energy in the heart is of the form I want, I desire, passion, love. Spiritualizing love means the love that runs out in 100 streams to the world. I want this, I want that. Collect it together and divert it, channelize it to the Lord. I love God. C.S. Lewis famously defined religion as falling in love with God. It's exactly the same phenomenon. When you fall in love with a person, in the same way, fall in love with God. I love God. Whatever form you like, Krishna or Kali or Jesus, whatever form you like. This is bhakti yoga. This is what this person on the spiritual life does. Converting all the love of the world into love of God. Does that mean the person doesn't love the world, people in the world anymore? He does, he or she does. But finding the Lord in the people. Sri Ramakrishna says, my nephew or my grandchild or whatever, that is Maya. It is my baby Krishna in all beings. That is Daya. So he makes a distinction between a spiritual love and a worldly love. My child, my nephew, my grandchild, my friends and brothers and sisters, worldly. All of them are my Lord. My Lord alone has come as the children, as my relatives and everybody else, even as my enemy. I love all of them because they are veritably my Lord. Bhakti yoga. Converting love and desire into love of God. Raja yoga, another practice. Our thoughts are scattered in the world throughout the day. Somebody said we think of 16,000 different thoughts in a waking day. Imagine that. Now, there are about many things in the world outside. And most of that thought is unconscious, is habitual. Basically patterns which we have developed unconsciously. Mostly unhelpful. Chattering of the mind. That has to be stopped and the thoughts have to be guided towards God or the self, or whatever your spiritual practice is. The practice of meditation, getting a control, a hold over the thoughts in our mind. Our minds are out of control. You see, Swami Sarvapriyanandaji used to give this example, that suppose you have an apartment in some other city, and your friend wants to go to that city and says, could I stay in your apartment? And you say, yeah, it's in the hands of a caretaker, I'm giving you a note. This is my friend, and he will go and stay in that apartment, let him stay in that apartment. And your friend goes to that apartment, rings the bell, and a couple of hefty, not very nice looking gentlemen come out. Yeah, what do you want? I'm going to stay here. The owner of the apartment has given me this note. You have to allow me to stay here. They take the note and tear it into pieces and grab your friend and toss him out into the street. Now, can you say you are still in charge of your apartment? No, it's been taken over. Some other people have come up the street and taken over your apartment. Our minds are like that. We have allowed thoughts to run riot in our minds for years and years together. Now I go to the Guru, and the Guru gives me a mantra, and I tell my mind, here is the mantra. He's going to stay in the mind for a while. And all those thoughts of the world, which I have been cultivating for many years, those guys come out and catch the poor mantra and toss him out. We shall not allow him to stay here. Minds are not under control. So mind is brought back under control by the systematic practice of meditation, Raja Yoga. And of course, primarily, Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, where we try to realize that we are existence, consciousness, bliss, not this physical body and mind. So that is the life of a spiritual seeker who steps away from the pursuit of happiness in the worldly or otherworldly sense, in the pursuit of spiritual happiness now. So we have two tracks. One track, trying to be happy here and trying to get heaven after death, leading a good life here and trying to lead a nice and pleasant life afterwards. That's one track, where I consider myself to be this limited individual, trying to beg and grab happiness from the world. Here, I am convinced of the teachings of the spiritual masters of all religions, especially in the Vedas, in the Vedanta, which says, I am existence, consciousness, bliss. How do I realize that? And I spend my life not in worldly pursuits, but in the pursuit of Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga, and Jnana Yoga, the paths of altruistic action, the path of love of God, the path of meditation, and the path of knowledge. You say, so what happens? Afterwards, you must not complain that, this path is good, but in the other path, my friend, he's making a lot of progress. Now he owns the latest Tesla and the latest iPhone 7. And I'm barely managing to hold on to my home. Very soon I'll be homeless probably. There you must not complain. You must not try to combine the two, this worldly pursuit and this one. Once we come to the spiritual life, whatever you have in the world, you don't have to turn your family out of doors. I'm going to be spiritual now, get out of my life. No. Whatever we have, whether you are in the ashram or you are in the family, that continues. But you're no longer trying to get happiness from that. You're no longer trying to accumulate more and more there. You convert that into a simple life, but a spiritualized life. You don't have to become homeless. I'm not saying that. Because any kind of extreme poverty or distress in the world outside is also harmful for spirituality. After all, even monks and nuns need monasteries and convents. So, yes. But two things have to be said here. A couple of quick observations. A person who is seeking happiness in the worldly sense, through money and pleasures in the world and so on, that person, if he or she cultivates a little bit of spirituality, turns towards God, prays and meditates and comes to Vedanta class once in a while, it's very good for that person. Even the little bit of this spiritual practice Swalpamapi asya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. The Gita says, Arjuna, Krishna says to Arjuna in the Gita, a little bit of spiritual practice. You may be the worldliest of persons, but whatever little bit of spiritual practice you do is all to the good. It's good for you. So that's one point. Person on the first track can benefit with some practice of the practices of the second track. A little bit also. To whatever extent he or she does, good. But it doesn't work the other way around. If we are on the spiritual track, trying to combine spirituality with worldliness is disastrous. Every accident and disaster in spiritual life happens when we are not quite satisfied with this life and we retain a little bit of worldly happiness. With that and this, then disaster strikes. Because this is built on the idea that pursuit is misguided, fundamentally misguided. We're trying to get happiness outside. If we still try to get happiness outside as well as God, it means I'm not convinced about this. Not being convinced about this, I will not get the happiness which is due to me here. We used to say that if you are unhappy in spiritual life, you're doing something wrong. In the Christian monastics, they have a saying. A sad saint is a bad saint. A person who's in a spiritual path and is sad, is miserable, is depressed, is a bad saint. There's something wrong with that person. And then this Upanishad goes on. Very quickly, I'll touch upon it. It's not one heaven. They go on step by step by step, saying that there are higher heavens. Each of these heavens gives you 100 times the happiness of the lower heaven. And each heaven you can get to by performing rituals and by doing good actions and getting more pleasure and more pleasure and more pleasure. And at each stage, that's track 1. And at each stage, the Upanishad tells us, if you are convinced about spiritual life, if you give up your desires and practice spiritual disciplines, you will get the same happiness right here in this life. You don't have to die and go to such and such heaven. And so it goes on. Heaven after heaven after heaven. And each stage, you can get the same happiness right here, right now, if you give up those desires and engage yourself in spiritual practice. And I was calculating, each heaven gives you 100 times the happiness and 100 times the happiness and 100 times the happiness. And how much is possible in this entire range? And I calculated, the highest heaven they're speaking about, it gives you 10 to the power 20 times the happiness of this most happy individual in this world. The young rich person, you remember. So 10 to the power 20, 1 followed by 20 zeros. Unthinkable. Probably will die if you try to conceive of it. So much pleasure and happiness. And he says all of that, the Upanishad says, can be ours today, here, right now. If we have this insight, all of that is from within us. Calm down your mind. Practice spirituality, altruistic action, devotion to God, meditation, and the path of knowledge, spiritual inquiry. You will get that happiness. You will be happy. The proof of that is saints, monks, nuns, spiritual seekers in all religions, in all paths, the sincere ones throughout the ages have been the happiest people known to humanity. Recently there was a neuroscience, they were conducting experiments. The Dalai Lama has this project where he asked his very senior lamas to submit themselves to fMRI scans of their brains. And they have isolated certain parts of the, it seems, the neocortex, which become active when a person is particularly calm. The other parts become quiet and this part becomes active. And when they scanned these lamas who had been meditating for decades and decades, the results were extraordinary. They said they were literally off the charts. And they were saying, these are probably the calmest persons, the most serene persons on the planet today. Which means you can do that. One can calm down that mind and get the benefit of the joy shining forth from within us. The first path in Sanskrit is called Vishayananda. The joy, the pleasure from Vishaya, objects of the world. This world or next world. The second path is called Bhajanananda. The path of the joy from spiritual practice, spiritual seeking. But this is not the end. I'll just touch upon the end, which is a tremendous, something beyond both of them. which they come to at the end. What he says is, in the Upanishad, in conclusion, the Upanishad states, Sa yaschayam purushe yaschasau aditye sa ekaha. The highest happiness one can conceive of in the highest heaven, highest worldly happiness, and the happiness of this one happy person on earth, 1 and 1 to 10 to the power 20, this difference. And what is this difference made of? In the worldly sense, the difference is due to variety of pleasures, better bodies, better heavens, and so on and so forth. In the spiritual sense, being grounded in Vedanta and in your spiritual practice and fundamentally on dispassion, from giving up desires, then you get this range of happiness. In spiritual life also there is a range of happiness. There are happy monks and happier monks and very, very happy monks. But what it says at the end is startling. It says this 1 unit of happiness and 10 to the power 20 happiness, it's one and the same. They are exactly the same thing. What does it mean? How can the happiness at which we begin and the happiness of the highest heaven, how can they be the same? That's 10 to the power 20 times more, incredibly more. And this is of course very happy, but still so much more. How do you reconcile? How do you say that both of them are the same? The answer is here. I just put it forward to you and just think about it. If all of these are reflections of our self, I am existence, consciousness, bliss. So the happiness that I experience at any point, whether it's worldly or spiritual, whether it's by enjoying a piece of cake or by meditating, they are both in the mind. Every happiness that we experience is in the mind. After all, where else could it be? The happiness is not in the cake. It's not a happy cake. In fact, if you're eating it up, it'll be a most unhappy cake. Happiness is always in our minds. So what is happening is, our true self, the Ananda which we are, our reality is being reflected like so many mirrors we have in front of us. A good polished mirror, good reflection. Broken, dusty mirror, poor reflection. A really sophisticated titanium mirror or something like that, fantastic reflection. But what are they all reflecting? The same face. It is the same Atman which is being reflected in the happiness of this rich young man in this world, and the happiness of the gods in the highest heavens, or the happiness of a spiritual seeker, an entire range of spiritual seeking. All of that happiness is you yourself. You are seeing your own happiness, experiencing your own happiness in all these mirrors. What you're only doing is in all these spiritual practices or in the worldly pursuits, you're just polishing the mirror. You are the source of all of this happiness, and you are this infinite happiness all the time. The commentator Shankaracharya says, there's an ocean of happiness within us, an ocean of joy and bliss within us. On a particle of this ocean, the world survives on a particle of this ocean. Entire world is rushing to get a little bit of happiness in life, and that happiness is just a drop of the ocean already within us, in each of us. It's the same ocean behind each of us. So that realization one comes to. After all, what is one doing when one is seeking in spiritual life? The second track, one is trying to realize that ocean. Another name for that is Brahman, the infinite. Existence, consciousness, bliss. When one comes to that realization, one goes even beyond bhajanananda, the joy of spirituality. You go beyond the joy of spirituality. Then that one is called Brahmananda. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, in the gospel we find, Vishayananda, the happiness of worldliness, worldly happiness, worldly or otherworldly. Bhajanananda, the happiness of spiritual seeking. Much greater, much wiser path to take. And he says, even beyond this, when you attain to realization, when you find God or you realize yourself as Brahman, Brahmananda. What are the differences between them? I will not dwell on now. But here is one more observation. one can go from Vishayananda to Bhajanananda to Brahmananda, from worldliness to spirituality to attainment of God. One cannot jump from worldliness straight to attainment of God. The path of spirituality is not dispensable. One has to go through that. One can fall back from spirituality into worldliness. That has happened. Unfortunately, there are such cases in every generation where you find people who are spiritual seekers and suddenly come crashing back into the grossest worldliness. But once one attains Brahmananda, a realization of the bliss within which we are, there is no return. There is no fall. What will happen then if we attain that? Nasa punaravartate. The one who realizes that never comes back into this cycle of birth and death. You see, the whole conception of Vedanta is, why do we exist in these limited forms? It is only to find the infinite within us. Moving from external seeking into internal seeking, into going beyond seeking. When we realize what we are. Once we realize what we are, there is no need for this limited existence. So it's said that that person, that enlightened person, never comes back into this limited existence which we are stuck to. We are stuck to the wheel of what Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, all the Indic religions, they call up the rotation of the wheel of life and death. Many lives, birth and death. We keep on going through that till we mature enough to move out of Vishayananda, worldliness, into spirituality, Bhajanananda, and finally attain Brahmananda. Om Asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from darkness unto light, lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace.